We've all experienced those moments when someone says something that doesn't quite sit right, a comment that feels like there's more beneath the surface. Perhaps a partner who suddenly questions your commitment, a friend who challenges your loyalty, or a colleague who doubts your competence. These moments aren't simply casual conversations. They're psychological tests, windows into our deepest insecurities and the unconscious dynamics that govern our relationships. Carl Jung understood that human communication exists on multiple levels simultaneously. What appears as a simple comment or question often serves as a projection of the speaker's inner world. When someone tests you, they're rarely aware they're doing it. They're acting from what Jung called the shadow, those disowned parts of themselves seeking expression. Consider Mike from Boston, who constantly questioned his girlfriend's whereabouts. Who were you talking to? Why are you dressed up today? On the surface, these seemed like innocent questions. But psychologically, Mike was testing her loyalty, projecting his own fear of abandonment shaped by his parents' divorce when he was 12. His questions weren't really about her actions. They were about his unresolved wounds. Or take Rebecca, a senior manager at a Chicago firm, who repeatedly tested her team's dedication by sending emails late at night. "I just need this by morning," she would write at 11 p.m. What she didn't recognize was how her own childhood, raised by a single mother who worked 3 jobs to support her, had created a deep belief that worth comes only through sacrifice and exhaustion. Her testing behavior wasn't conscious. It was her shadow seeking validation for a pattern she herself had been subjected to. What's fascinating is how we respond to these tests reveals more about us than about the person testing us. When someone tests your confidence, your reaction exposes your relationship with your own self-worth. When they test your boundaries, your response illuminates how you value yourself. Think about the last time someone made you feel like you needed to prove yourself. What emotions surfaced? Anger, insecurity, the urge to defend yourself. These reactions aren't random. They're messengers from your unconscious, showing you where healing is needed. Jung believed that becoming conscious of these patterns is the first step toward individuation, the process of becoming psychologically whole. When you recognize a test for what it is, you gain the power to respond rather than react. There are several common psychological tests we encounter in our relationships. The loyalty test. I wonder if you'd still be here if I wasn't successful. The worthiness test. Do you really think you deserve this opportunity? The commitment test. I'm not sure this relationship is working for me anymore. The boundary test. I know you said no, but just this once. The competence test. Anyone could have done what you did. The independence test. I don't need your help, I can handle everything myself. Each test carries a hidden invitation, not to prove yourself to others, but to discover something essential about yourself. The person testing you is unconsciously asking, will you abandon yourself to please me? Will you compromise your truth to avoid conflict? Will you forget who you are when challenged? These tests often appear at critical junctures in relationships. The colleague who undermines your presentation right before a promotion decision. The friend who creates drama when you start spending time with new people. The partner who brings out relationship doubts as you approach deeper commitment. The timing of these tests is rarely coincidental. They emerge precisely when unconscious fears are triggered. Americans particularly struggle with these tests in a culture that emphasizes independence yet craves belonging. We want connection without vulnerability, achievement without failure. We live in a society where social media has turned comparison into a constant activity, and where showing weakness is often seen as fatal to success. This contradiction creates fertile ground for unconscious testing in our relationships. Consider how American workplace culture normalizes testing behaviors that would be considered dysfunctional in other contexts. The boss who intentionally creates stress to see what you're made of. The interview process that deliberately puts candidates under pressure to test their mettle. These aren't just professional norms, they're psychological patterns that reflect our collective shadow. The truth is, these tests will never stop coming. What can change is your awareness of them. When you recognize a test in progress, pause. Ask yourself, what is this interaction really about? What wound or fear in them is speaking? What part of me feels threatened by this challenge? This awareness doesn't mean you need to pass every test. Sometimes the most powerful response is to decline to participate in the testing altogether, to see it clearly for what it is, without being pulled into its emotional undertow. In Jung's framework, each test offers a glimpse into your own unconscious. When someone tests your patience and you become disproportionately angry, that anger likely connects to older, deeper wounds. When someone's lack of trust triggers intense anxiety in you, that anxiety has roots beyond the present moment. These emotions aren't problems to overcome. They're signposts pointing toward inner work that wants to happen. What parts of yourself do you compromise when tested? What masks do you wear to pass other people's examinations? These questions aren't merely philosophical, they're pathways to authentic living. Because ultimately, the most important test isn't from others at all. It's whether you can remain true to yourself in the face of pressure to be something you're not. When we recognize that someone is testing us, we stand at a crossroads of profound psychological significance. This moment of awareness presents an invitation, not just to navigate a difficult interaction, but to transform ourselves from within. Jung understood that our most challenging relationships serve as mirrors, reflecting the parts of ourselves we've yet to integrate. The person testing your patience may be activating your own unacknowledged intolerance. The one questioning your worth might be touching on the very self-doubts you've tried to suppress. In American society, we often respond to tests with what psychologists call the fight-flight-freeze response. We either become defensive, withdraw emotionally, or become paralyzed with indecision. Each reaction is understandable, but each also represents a missed opportunity for growth. Consider Sarah, a teacher from Chicago, who faced constant criticism from her principal about her teaching methods. Each evaluation felt like a test she couldn't pass. Initially, Sarah cycled through defensiveness and despair until she realized something profound. Her reaction wasn't just about her principal's criticism. It was connected to her childhood experience of never feeling good enough for her high-achieving parents. This awareness didn't make the criticism easier to hear, but it changed what she could learn from it. Jung called this process of recognizing our projections and reclaiming our disowned parts shadow work. It's perhaps the most challenging yet transformative psychological journey we can undertake. When someone tests you, they're unknowingly offering you a map to your own shadow, those disowned aspects of yourself that influence your behavior without your awareness. These moments of testing become portals to self-knowledge if we're willing to look beyond our initial emotional reactions. Ask yourself, what emotional wounds get activated when you're tested? What childhood patterns resurface? Whose voice do you really hear when someone questions your choices? These connections between present triggers and past experiences aren't coincidental. They're meaningful psychological patterns awaiting your recognition. In America's achievement-oriented culture, we're conditioned to see tests as something to pass or fail. But psychological tests aren't about winning or losing, they're about becoming more whole. When someone tests your confidence, they're offering you an opportunity to examine your relationship with your own self-worth at a deeper level. This inner transformation follows a pattern that Jung observed across cultures and throughout history. First comes the discomfort, the emotional activation that signals something important is happening beneath the surface. Then awareness, the moment you recognize that your reaction reveals more about you than about the person testing you. Next is integration, the courageous work of acknowledging and accepting the parts of yourself that these tests expose. And finally, transformation, emerging with greater wholeness and authenticity than before. Jennifer, an executive in New York, described how her husband's constant testing of her career commitment initially triggered rage. "I felt like I was constantly defending my choices," she explained. But when she explored her reactions more deeply, she discovered it wasn't really about his questions. His testing activated her own unacknowledged guilt about working long hours, a guilt she had never fully addressed. This realization didn't solve their conflict, but it shifted something essential within her. Jung believed that this kind of psychological growth isn't optional but necessary, not just for personal fulfillment, but for our collective well-being. In his view, a society of people unwilling to face their shadows becomes increasingly polarized, projecting disowned qualities onto others rather than integrating them. The invitation, then, is to welcome these tests not as obstacles to avoid, but as doorways to pass through. Each time you're tested and respond with conscious awareness rather than unconscious reaction, you're participating in what Jung considered the true purpose of human existence, becoming more fully yourself. What parts of your personality emerge when you're under pressure? What aspects of yourself do you discover in conflict that remain hidden during comfort? These revelations aren't interruptions of your life's journey. They are the journey itself. Behind every test we face in our relationships lies something far older and deeper than our personal history. Carl Jung discovered that these patterns connect to what he called archetypes, universal psychological templates that exist within the collective unconscious of humanity. When someone tests you, they're often unconsciously playing out an archetypal role and inviting you to play its complement. Understanding these archetypal dimensions adds profound depth to our everyday interactions. Consider how many Americans grow up with fairy tales and movies where characters test one another. The suspicious king testing a knight's loyalty, the witch testing the hero's resolve, the mentor testing the student's commitment. These aren't just entertaining stories. They're expressions of archetypal patterns that continue to shape our relationships today. The most common archetypal tests we encounter include the initiation test, like traditional rites of passage in Native American cultures or modern fraternity. Hazing these tests ask, do you have what it takes to belong? When a boss gives you an impossible deadline or a social circle makes you prove your worthiness, you're facing an initiation test. David, a software engineer in Seattle, described his first year at a prestigious tech company as psychological boot camp. His team leader constantly challenged his ideas and questioned his solutions. What David eventually realized was that this wasn't personal. It was an archetypal initiation. Everyone on the team had gone through similar testing. Understanding the archetypal nature of the experience helped David respond with greater resilience. The temptation test. These tests, prominent in religious narratives across America's diverse faith traditions, challenge your alignment with your own values. When someone offers you a shortcut that compromises your integrity or an opportunity that would betray your principles, you're encountering this archetype. The loyalty test. From American military codes of honor to childhood friendship, PACT's loyalty tests appear throughout our culture. These tests ask, will you stand by me when it costs you something to do so? The colleague who shares sensitive information to see if you'll keep it confidential, or the friend who watches how you speak about them in their absence. These are archetypal loyalty tests. The authority test, particularly powerful in American culture with its complex relationship to authority. These tests examine how you respond to power. Do you surrender your autonomy too easily or rebel reflexively? The boss who makes an unreasonable request, or the partner who makes demands rather than requests, is often unconsciously deploying this archetypal test. Michelle, a therapist from Atlanta, noticed that certain clients consistently tested her authority, arriving late, questioning her methods or challenging her expertise. Rather than taking it personally, she recognized the archetypal pattern. These clients had unresolved conflicts with authority figures. By seeing the archetypal dimension, Michelle could respond to the deeper need beneath the testing behavior. Jung believed that becoming conscious of these archetypal patterns liberates us from being unconsciously controlled by them. When you recognize that someone's testing behavior fits an ancient pattern rather than being merely personal, you gain psychological freedom. The test becomes less about you specifically and more about human nature itself. This doesn't mean dismissing the real impact of harmful testing behavior. Rather, it means seeing that behavior within a larger context that gives you more options for how to respond. In American society, where individualism is prized, we often resist acknowledging these universal patterns. We want to believe our experiences are unique, yet paradoxically, recognizing the archetypal dimensions of our relationships connects us more deeply to our shared humanity. When you feel tested, ask yourself, what archetypal drama might be playing out here? Am I being cast as the hero who must prove themselves, the loyal friend who must demonstrate fidelity, the wise counselor who must show patience? Seeing these archetypal dimensions doesn't diminish your personal experience. It enriches it with meaning and context. Jung saw that when we become conscious participants in these archetypal patterns rather than unconscious actors, we transform not just ourselves, but the patterns themselves. We bring new consciousness to ancient dramas. The tests we face in relationships aren't just personal challenges, they're opportunities to participate in the ongoing evolution of human consciousness. By responding with awareness to the person, testing your patience, your worth, or your boundaries, you're doing something profoundly significant. You're bringing light to shadows that have existed for generations. What archetypes do you find yourself living out in your relationships? What ancient roles do others cast you in? These questions invite us to see our personal experiences as connected to something timeless, not to escape responsibility, but to locate our individual journeys within the vast landscape of human experience. Because, ultimately, the tests we face aren't just about passing or failing, they're invitations to become more conscious participants in the unfolding story of what it means to be human.